Hi, you guys. Welcome to our live event. I'm Brenda KB Anderson. Today, I'm going to be showing you how to make this adorable tea cozy. I called it the traditional tea cozy because as I was doing research on tea cozies, I kept seeing knitted versions of this tea cozy, not necessarily with the flowers on top, but with these stripes and oftentimes like a pom-pom on top. And I thought, what is going on with that cool pleated fabric? I want to learn how to do that. So I figured out how to do it knitwise, and then I translated it into crochet, and I'm here to show you guys how to do it. So I'm very excited about this technique. It's super fun and really it's not difficult. It's basically single crochet with one little twist, which I'll be showing you guys. So I'm glad you guys are here. If you want to say hi, tell me where you're crocheting from. That'd be great. Another thing that I was going to ask you guys is, I have only recently begun to get kind of into drinking tea. And it's kind of funny. I think I've just been watching a lot of Bridgerton, and it's just sort of seeping into my subconscious, and now I want to drink tea all the time. But if you guys have suggestions or want to tell me your favorite tea, I would love that. I would love to have some suggestions on things I should try, because I don't really know that much about tea yet. I just have been trying random things that other people recommend to me. So I find that's a good way to do things usually. So if you want to drop that in there, that'd be great. If you guys have any questions about what I'm doing, if I do something too fast or I need to slow down or need to repeat something, please let me know. That's why we're doing these live events, so you guys can, get extra help if I'm, just to make sure that I'm explaining things thoroughly to you guys. All right, so there is a free download, the traditional tea cozy. You can find that in the description. There should be a link there. So you can go ahead and download that now. It'll also be available later, no problem. You can just watch this now and get it later once you're gonna make it. So let's just start by talking a little bit about this tea cozy a little bit. I just barely introduced you to this adorable thing. Okay, so when I was doing a live event, I don't know, it was months ago now, maybe even half a year ago now. Oftentimes I ask people for suggestions on things that they would be interested in learning, whether it's a type of project they want to make or a certain technique or whatever. If you guys have any ideas for future events, definitely put those in the chat as well. But somebody asked me to make a tea cozy, and I thought, a tea cozy? Okay, I can make a tea. I've never made a tea cozy. And then I started looking into making tea cozies, and that sort of coincided with my whole thing about learning, like starting to get excited about tea, and it all just kind of snowballed, and I got really excited about it. So I'm very excited about this project, you guys. But anyway, when I was doing research on tea cozies, I was like, how can you possibly teach a thing so everyone can make a tea cozy for their teapots, because they're all different, different shapes, different proportions. So the way that this is written up, if you make it as written, it's kind of for this. Let me I'll take this off so you guys can see what this teapot looks like. It's a pretty, I wouldn't say standard, because I don't know if there is a standard, but these two teapots, they're totally different brands from completely different decades, but they had similar shapes to each other, and to me they looked like fairly usual shapes for teapots. So I wanted to start out there making tea cozies for something that like maybe the majority of people could make it just as written for their teapots. However, if you have a teapot that's like tall and more narrow, or has different handles in different places or whatever, definitely ask me if you feel like this is not going to fit your teapot, if you want to ask me for certain modifications. But I'll also be talking about ways you can modify the tea cozy in order to fit different proportions of your teapot as well, because I realize not everybody's teapot is going to be shaped like mine. So we will talk about that as we go along. Okay, so let me bring this back in here. So this tea cozy, it's basically like a little hat a little sweater for your teapot, and it has a hole on each end. So one is for the spout, one's for the handle. I have to be singing that. Here's my handle and here's my spout in my head right now. And it just dresses on like this. You just place it over the spout, have that come through, and then I hold on to the spout, and then I just pull it over the handle, just like that. And it's stretchy. There's no fastening, there's no buttons or anything like that. You could certainly add those if you wanted to, like maybe the space here, if you wanted to button that up, you could, but really it's just constructed in mainly 2 pieces that are stitched together. So that's going to allow you to put the openings wherever you need them for your spout, for your handle, okay? So that it's very adjustable in that way. And then, yeah, then we have these cute little adorable 3-dimensional flowers on top to decorate it. Make it look even cuter. All right. Oh, Helene is here from Moorpack. I don't know where Moorpack? I don't know if I'm saying it right, but from California. Hello. Hi, Helen or Helene. I'm not really sure how you say your name. You can also tell me that too. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing it, but I'm glad you're here. Okay, so we're obviously going to be needing a bunch of yarn for this project. So I chose a variety of different colors for the flowers. So there's 3 colors. You're going to need those 3 contrasting colors plus a color for the center of the flower. Also a color for the leaves. Now that leaf color could be the same as some of the stripes if you wanted it to. I wanted it to stand out a little more, so I made that in a different green. And then we have what I'm calling the main color in the teapot, which is the green. The only difference between the main color and the contrasting color is that we start out with the main color, so there's a stripe of the main color along the bottom. And the contrasting color in this one is like an off-white kind of color. I chose to make this out of a wool. This is 100% wool because I know how insulating wool is, and I really wanted my teapot cozy to be making my tea very warm, right? To keep it nice and cozy. So I on purpose chose to design it in a 100% wool. If you do not like to use wool, if you want to use something else, I think acrylic would work just fine. I think you may want to do a little test to just steam your acrylic or make some tea in a pot and set it on a little swatch of acrylic just to make sure it doesn't do anything funny to your acrylic, like make it shiny, or I don't think it's going to melt it. Your teapot's probably not going to be hot enough for that. But I did not test this out for an acrylic, but I have seen lots of acrylic tea cozies, so I'm pretty sure it would be just fine. But you might want to just do a little swatch, set a hot teapot on top of it just to make sure nothing surprising happens to your tea cozy. But yes, this is a worsted weight yarn, so it's a number 4. It's slightly on the thinner side than some of the worsted weight yarns you might find in like a big box store. But yeah, so I'd say it's a pretty average size worsted weight yarn. And you could choose whether you want to do this in a washable wool, if this is something where you're worried you're going to get a lot of tea dripped on it and you're going to want to throw it in the wash. Or you can just do it out of a regular wool that's not a superwash wool. Either way, and then you just have to hand wash it. So, alrighty. Oh, Cindy's here. Ginger turmeric tea. Oh, okay. I think that my husband has some of that. I haven't tried it yet, but I am excited to try that. Ooh. And also I know that that's really good for you, especially like if you have a cold or something like that. Oh, Belle's here again. Okay, awesome. Oh, thank you for your compliments. That's so sweet. I'm glad that you're here. Hello, and hello to Carolyn, who I believe may have been in the last live as well, if I remember correctly. Hello, I'm glad you're here. All right. Oh, and we've got a hello from Abu Dhabi. Wow. Cool. I love it. And someone from Tucson, Arizona, Carolyn. I'm not sure how to say it, but hello and welcome, everybody. Okay. So as I was saying before, when I was doing my research on tea cozies, because it never occurred to me ever to design a tea cozy or like to even have one, I was like, wow, this is really a thing. People love their tea cozies. This has been going on for centuries. I don't know how I missed all this. Yeah, and there's like forums talking about the tea cozies from Call the Midwife and all these different like popular tea cozies. I somehow missed all of that. So I'm very thankful that whoever it was that suggested I make a cozy, that they put that in the comments, because it brought me down a really fun rabbit hole of tea cozies. But while I was doing that, I noticed that there were so many of these, tea cozy, like vintage tea cozy patterns that had these little pleats in it. And I was so curious about that. So I figured out, I learned from using the internet, I learned how to make the knitted version of this. And I thought, well, we can certainly do that with crochet. It really translated very, very well. So I want to show you what this looks like. Just so you guys can see what we're doing here. So this fabric, I'm going to kind of turn it around. It's bumpy. It's like corrugated or pleated. It's got all these little bumps and tucks that go in on the outside, and it is stretchy, which makes this great for fitting different teapots and also for getting it on your teapot and having it be nice and snug once you get it on. But it has this amount of stretch to it, which is really cool. And you can see on the wrong side, here we have all these weird strands of, these are basically the unused strands when I switch back and forth between colors. Because what we're doing is we are switching back and forth between, this is kind of like color work, but it's not, it's not the kind of color work that you have to look at a chart and then concentrate on really hard and make sure you put the color in the right spot. We're making columns of colors, and when we switch back and forth between the two colors, we're using like the stranded tapestry style of switching. So you have like a little strand of yarn on the back, and when you switch back and forth between the colors, you pull on that yarn strand, and that does not allow your fabric to lay flat anymore. It kind of puckers it. And normally when we're working in color work, that like you don't want to do that. You want to avoid that. You're always checking to make sure you're not accidentally puckering your work. But in this case, we're using it as a design feature and kind of highlighting that and creating this very cool, bumpy, textured, pleated, ribbed, I don't know what you want to call it, fabric that has, it's just really good for keeping things warm because it's got those channels of air and the wool, and it's just like the perfect thing. All right, so I'm going to show you how to do this. It's not as hard as it looks. I know this might look kind of like confusing or weird looking at the back of it, but it's not as hard as it looks. All righty, so I want to call attention to this because I made a mistake. I wrote down that I had used a G hook, which I did for the first tea cozy that I made, but that is not what this pattern is. So I used an H hook, which is a 5mm hook, so I will get that fixed, but for right now, if you've downloaded this already, check for where it says USG 4mm. You're gonna change that to an H8 5mm, okay, in your materials. That's the only issue with it. You just need to change that, but also, it's more important to use whatever hook you need to in order to get the fabric you like and to get the size of the tea cozy, like to get it to work out on your teapot. And we'll talk a little more about that as we go. In the pattern, normally I have like a 4x4 gauge swatch so you can test to see how your gauge is compared to mine. That way you'll know actually what hook to use. This is just the hook that I used for this project. And it's a place to start. But you can certainly use you should use a different hook size if it's not turning out to the correct size. Normally I have a 4x4 gauge swatch listed in my pattern. This time I'm just telling you to make half of the tea cozy, which is about this wide, and then we're gonna check it on the teapot because it just makes so much more sense. Otherwise you'd be spending a lot of time making something like this, but if you just made it a little wider, you could fit it on your teapot and just know all the information. You would know if you need to alter the pattern at all, or go up a hook size, or go down a hook size, or whatever it is you need to know in order for it to fit your teapot. So, okay. So I am going to start out by making a slightly smaller swatch so that way it won't take me so long to get back and forth and really show you what's happening here in this stitch pattern. So your initial foundation chain will be longer. Let me get into that. I think you're going to start with either 54 or 64, depending on the size. Oh yeah, 55 or 65. Sorry, that includes the turning chain. Okay. Oh, let me back up a little bit. So in this pattern download, there are two sizes of tea cozies, and I did write both of them down. One is for this size, and one is for this size. So we have like I think this is like a 6 cup and this is a 4 cup, but I know that is not always a standard. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the same circumference if you have the same amount of cups in there. So I also did link where this teapot came from, this white teapot here. This was purchased on Amazon. I was looking for something that had dimensions that you guys could look at so you can check it out and know, like it might help you compare it to your own teapot at home. And it has very similar proportions to this. This is my grandmother's teapot, so you can't buy that on Amazon. But anyway, hopefully that will help you like determining your size. Also, you can compare that to the circumference of your teapot because I have all that information in the pattern download to figure out which size you want to make. And I will also be letting you know like ways to alter it if neither of those sizes work. But if you are making the larger tea cozy that I patterned up here, you will start with a chain of 65 chains in your foundation chain. If you're making one for the smaller, you would start with 55. As long as you are chaining on a multiple of 10 plus 4 more stitches, then the pattern is going to work out just fine. So that if you have to add stitches, you'll have to add them in groups of 10. If you need to subtract stitches, then you're going to subtract them in groups of 10. Otherwise, it's not going to turn out right. Okay, or turn out as expected, I should say. All right, so I'm going to start by actually chaining 34. I know that's not in my pattern, but I'm just doing a slightly smaller sample so you can see how this all works up and how to make those pleats. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34. Now you might be thinking, wow, that's a really long chain, Brenda. Isn't that going to be like a little too big? Like, how could a 65-inch chain would be enormous? But remember, this is pleated, so the fabric is much longer than you think, because it goes up and down and up and down and up and down. So until you've worked a number of rows in the stitch pattern, you're not going to really know how wide your piece is going to be. And because of this particular technique that we're working on here, your gauge may differ from mine anyway. But it's just something to just keep in the back of your head. When you first make that chain, it's going to be way longer than you think it should be. And then you're going to pleat it up and it's going to become much shorter. Okay, I think I only chained 34 and I need to actually chain 35. I'm going to be working across 34 stitches. Okay, so we're going to begin by working into the bottom of our chain. So the top of your chain has all these little V's that kind of go across. The bottom of your chain has all these little horizontal dashes like this. Those horizontal dashes, that's what we're going to be working under. We're going to skip the very first chain from the hook, which is right there, and we're going to work a single crochet into the next chain, which is right here. So we insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. There's our first single crochet. And we're just going to continue making those single crochets all the way across the whole piece, the entire foundation chain. Okay, so we're going to have actually 2 rows of single crochet worked all the way across. All right, so once you get all the way across, in order to turn your work, let's just imagine I'm doing my last stitch right here. Then you would chain 1, turn your work, just like you're turning a page in a book. You're going to skip that chain because that is a turning chain. We are not counting turning chains as a stitch in this pattern. So we're going to skip that and go right into this first stitch right here and make a single crochet and single crochet our way all the way across. Okay, I know this looks weird. This is not what your piece should look like. Basically, you're just making a foundation chain and then you're doing 2 rows of single crochet. So you're going to have a long skinny piece. This is still much shorter than yours would be unless you're making it for a tiny teapot. This is only with 34 stitches right here. So a multiple of 10 plus 4. Yours would be, a bit longer. So you'd either have 54 or 64 stitches, just depending on what size you're working up. All right, so this is where the exciting part starts to happen, you guys. Put on your seatbelts, it's gonna get crazy. All right, so we just got to the end of our second row of single crochet right here. So we're gonna chain 1, we're gonna turn our work, and we're gonna do a single crochet into each of the first 2 stitches. So there's our first single crochet, there's our second single crochet, and before we complete our second single crochet, we are going to switch to the next color. So this is normally how we switch color when we're working in color work in crochet, which is something that I love to do. Normally we wait till the very last yarn over of the stitch before the color change. Okay, so this is my second stitch in the main color. And I'm going to take my contrast color and just lay it on top of my hook like that. And then I'm just going to pull that through to complete that second single crochet. And here we are ready to go with our new color. Oh, there's lots of people pouring in here. That's awesome. Ooh, we've got, oh, Cindy's saying, misspoke, it's organic turmeric ginger by Habit Tea, and it's wonderful for my arthritis. Oh, okay. Do not heat water in the pot with the cozy in place. Yeah, so this would be for a teapot, not a tea kettle. So you would heat the water in the tea kettle and then pour it into your teapot and then dress your teapot with its beautiful sweater. Yes, correct. Hannah's saying we don't use a teapot, but we might have to thrift one to make one of these for. It's really cute. Thank you. It is really nice having a teapot. I've had this from my grandmother for a long time, but I've almost never used it. And then my kids were like, Mom, we want to have a tea party, which is kind of funny because they never cared about this when they were really little, you know. And so I pulled it out and I'm like, oh, this is why people have teapots. Like, so you can have multiple people sitting around drinking tea and you don't have to constantly be making more or pouring. I don't know. It just seemed very convenient. I was like, finally I understand. Okay. All right. Oh, Brat's mom's here. Hi. Thank you for the compliment. Okay. So we have just pulled up our new color. Okay. So we're ready to go with our new color. And we're just going to let the old color just hang out back here. We're going to need that later, so don't cut it off or anything, but just let it hang out there. And I should also mention this is row number 3. Row number 3 is a right side row. So all of the, you'll see it'll be very, very obvious what the right side row is because it's the pleated side. The stranded side on the back is going to be the wrong side row. So the only reason I'm telling you this now is because we just want our yarn to hang on the opposite side, on the wrong side of what we're looking at right now. Okay, so now we're going to do 5 single crochets in this new color. So insert yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Let's see, I wonder if I should, I'm going to see if this helps at all. No, that's the same color. I don't know if you guys can see that any better. That lighter color just doesn't seem like it was showing up too good on the table. Sorry. I chose 2 very contrasting colors so you guys could see the difference between the 2 colors really well, but I guess I should have maybe brought a background for this one. Okay, so we're going to use our flower as our background. So we're going to do 5 single crochets here. So this is number 2, 3, 4, and then here's our 5th one, but on the 5th one, we're going to change to the next color. So we're doing groups of 5 all the way across, and then on the 2 edges, we're just doing like a border of 2 stitches. I'll explain that a little bit more too as we go, but here's our 5th stitch. And now to complete that stitch, we're gonna yarn over with the old color, which is way back here. Remember we dropped it at the beginning here, so it's way over here. And we're gonna just pinch this in half. We're just going to fold that in half. So let me show you that one more time. So here's our old color. That's where we dropped it. Right now we're looking, this is the wrong side of our work here. And we're bringing that all the way over so that when we yarn over and pull through, we're making a little pleat in our work. See how that won't let it lay flat anymore? We pulled it tight. This is like the thing when you're teaching people how to do tapestry crochet, but you're stranding it across the back. You have to keep saying, now make sure you're not pulling your floats too tight. That's like float on the back where you just have that strand coming across. But in this case, you do want to pull it because that's what's going to create those pleats. You'll see this more. I'll keep working on it and you'll see it kind of unfold a little more. Okay, so we're going to do 5 stitches in this purple color. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and here's our 5th stitch. So we're going to insert yarn over, pull up a loop, and we're going to stop when we have those 2 loops on our hook, and we're going to finish our single crochet with this lighter color here. Whoops, don't grab your beginning tail though, like I always seem to do. Okay, so we're gonna grab this color and I like to just kind of fold this so that they're closer together. So what we're looking at, this is the front of our work. We've got that pleat pinched together and it's pointing towards my body here. Okay, so that we're making those pleats kind of come towards us. And when we pinch that, all of a sudden this is really nearby, right? Because we're just kind of folding that out of the way. So we're just going to yarn over and pull through those 2 stitches. And then when I do that, I find that this loop always gets a little too long, so I just kind of tug on that last loop of the color that we just got rid of and just let this hang to the back of your work now. Just hanging out back there. And we're going to do 5 stitches in this color, and on the 5th stitch we're going to switch. 3, 4, here comes the 5, this one. And we're going to switch to this purple color. So again, I just kind of pinch this like that and yarn over and pull through like that. And continue on. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and here's number 5. That's where we're going to stop before our last yarn over, grab that new color, or the color we're changing into, and pull through 2. Then we tug on the last little strand just to kind of tighten that down a little bit. Doesn't have to be super tight, it just tends to get kind of loose. 1, 2, 3, 4, and here's number 5. We're pinching it and we're just grabbing that and pulling it through. 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're stopping on number 5 so we can yarn over, do our last yarn over with the next color right there. And then I'll pull on that little last yarn tail to tighten that down a little. And here's our last 2 stitches. So 1 and 2. So now, no matter how many chains you started with, every time you are going back and forth, you're always going to be working in 5 single crochets at a time. So you'll do 5 colors or 5 stitches in one color. Then on that 5th stitch, you'll switch to the next color. 5 stitches in the next color. On that last single crochet, the last yarn over, you'll switch to the next color. So it's always in groups of 5. So you're alternating between those stitches. So 5 of the light, 5 of the dark, 5 of the light, 5 of the dark. So that's all, no matter what size you're working on, that's how you're going to be working your color work. It's always going to start out on the right side row. It's going to start out with that main color. So 2 stitches in the main color. Then you alternate those 5s all the way across. And then you'll have 2 stitches in the contrasting color on the very end. Okay, so that's the same no matter what size you're working on. Okay, so we're going to chain 1 and we're going to turn, and now we can see our wrong side rows. Now this is a little messy looking at first. And it does get easier to stitch into. At the beginning it's like, it's all curly and it just kind of drives you crazy for a few rows, but when you get into it, you can see that it's like really obvious, the front row, the back row, and the fabric's already been pinched for you because it's being like restricted by all these floats back here. So you don't have to keep pinching it you can kind of pinch it a little bit, but it's not, what I'm trying to say is that it might seem like the first couple of rows are a little bit of a struggle because it's a new thing that you're trying out and you're like, what is happening? And also, this is annoying to have to pinch it every time, Brenda. But it does get much easier, I promise. Okay, so here we are looking at the wrong side rows. We're going to do 2 single crochets, 1 and 2, and now you might notice these single crochets right before the color change, the previous rows single crochets, right before the color change, they get a little small and a little bit tighter. You can still get your hook through just fine. You can loosen that up, but just don't miss them. So it's helpful if you can count your stitches for a little while until you kind of get into the rhythm and you can see those stitches hiding a little bit. Okay, here's my second single crochet. Now I'm going to bring this yarn towards me. So it's going to be on this is the wrong, remember this is a wrong side row we're doing. It's going to sit on the wrong side. Then we're going to take this color and then we're going to yarn over with that. Okay, so we're switching. And then we just kind of pull this out of the way. So you just want to tuck it down into that little groove there. And then you're going to do some single crochets. So you're doing 5 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, and here's the 5th one that kind of wants to be small and hide there. 5, but before we do our last yarn over, we're going to bring this down to the front. Okay, so here I'll put my thumb under it so you can see. I'm bringing that yarn down to the front, and then I'm going to bring this yarn over, and we can pinch that and bring it a little closer like this. Okay, so this strand is not allowing it to lay flat anymore. That's what's creating those pleats. Now we're going to continue in this color, the light color. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's the 5th one. Before we complete that, we're going to bring this lighter color towards us. And then we're going to pick up the darker color and allow that to kind of fold right there. And we'll bring that through. And then we're going to do our next stitch. So just make sure that this is always sitting on the wrong side. Sometimes the wrong side will be facing you, like right now. Sometimes the wrong side will be on the opposite side. Just depends, on whether you see the pleats or not. So just be aware that it should always be hanging. They should always be hanging to the wrong side. So I'm going to bring that down like that. Bring this one over. Just switching up my yarns and making kind of like a tighter float across the back. That's what's going to push that fabric into that pleat shape. Bringing it towards me, and now I'm going to switch to this other. So I kind of just pinch that with my thumb there and pull through. Here are my 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's the 5th stitch. Pinch and bring that through. 1, 2, 3, 4. And 5. You don't have to count them as long as you don't miss that last stitch, as long as you have trained yourself to always be looking for that stitch that's just a little bit smaller. And here are the last 2 single crochets of our row. So when we do those, we don't have to carry this along. We just leave it there because we're going to chain 1 and turn, and we're going to work our way back in the same color. 1, 2, and then at that point, before we finish that, that's when we drop that one, and we're going to pick up this one and yarn over with it to change color. And so we're all ready to begin working in this color. So 1, oh no, I grabbed the wrong, I grabbed the yarn tail. Okay, I knew I would do that. Okay, here it is. Let me get that out of the way. There we go. So you just got to make sure you're not crocheting with the yarn tail, and maybe just weave that in. That would be good, actually. Okay, so here we go. Working those 5 single crochets. 3, 4, and here's our 5th one. You can kind of help it by pinching that little bit. That brings your yarn closer, and pull through those 2 stitches. So I'm going to continue working across this row so you can kind of see it start to take shape. But the majority of this section of the teapot is just made like this. So you just go back and forth and back and forth, and it's it's slower than just doing regular single crochet, but you are crocheting a lot longer distance here, and you're doing some pretty cool stuff. making these pleats. So give yourself a little extra time when you are working on this project. It's very fun. It's really cool to make such an interesting, I mean, I've never made a stitch that was like this before, so it was very fun for me. We have somebody who's watching from Kazakhstan. That's awesome. Tea cozy is my favorite project. I have too much tea cozies. Oh, too many tea cozies. Uh-oh. Is there such a thing? I suppose. Maybe not, though. Well, thank you for joining us, everybody. Okay. Oh, Cindy's got to go. Okay. She'll join for the replay squad. Yeah, you guys can always watch these later, which is great. So even if you don't have time to watch the whole thing, or, you know, we're streaming when, you know, it's not a convenient time for you, you can always watch them later. Or as you're working on them, if you have a question, you can come back to it later. Oh, we've got a favorite of Earl Grey. Okay, thank you, Janet. All right. I have had some Earl Grey teas, and I did like them. I don't know, though. I don't know if like we had a blind taste test of a bunch of tea. I don't know for sure that I'd be able to. I don't know if I'm good enough at understanding the flavors yet to be able to know what it was, but I did like the one that I had, or a couple of them that I had. Okay, so you can see, look at this is rippling now. You can kind of see those strands on the back. They're holding it, they're keeping it from being able to be a long flat piece. You can see it's much shorter now. So as you work on this and you get it a little bit, you know, further along, you can maybe just like even another inch or something, just start trying it on your teapot. Now this is going to be too small for my teapot. I know this because it really I designed it and it has to be 54 inches for this one. But then you'll just kind of bring it over to your teapot, check it. Like you're going to be stitching one side to the other, right above the spout, right below the spout. So it doesn't, you know, this is usually the widest part of your teapot because it kind of usually rounds out a little bit, but it doesn't have to go from the center of the spout. It can kind of split from the side of the spout over to somewhere by the handle. So I check it in a few places. I check it at the bottom, just kind of try to visualize, check it at the top, although we're going to be decreasing there. Check it in the middle. That is probably the most important part, is checking to see if you think it's going to be the right size at where it's at its widest point. So let me show you, once you get a little further along, working, you know, you're just going to continue working back and forth and back and forth. And every time you're working from this side, you have to have when you're not using your yarn, you're going to bring it to the wrong side rows. You know, you're going to bring it to the back. And every time you're working across this way, you're going to start to see those strands. You're going to remember, oh, okay, I got to let my yarn hang out on the side of the work that I can see here. Okay, so no matter what, when you're not working on that, if you're dropping a strand, drop it to the side where all this stranded stuff is going on. Okay, just remember that. Okay, so this is worked all the way up through row 16, which is, I think row 16, for my tea cozy. Although I have to tell you, I was making this with a smaller crochet hook for a different teapot, so this one's going to be a little bit smaller than if I had been working it with the H hook like I should, but just a smidgy. But you can kind of, once it gets a little taller, you can check it on your teapot. And just make sure as you're going that it's going to be working out. Now, so this is the part where if it's not working out, you can either, if it's too small, you can go up a hook size, and maybe if it's just a little too small, you can just go up a hook size and you'll be okay. Or if it's a little too big, you can go down a hook size, make it a little tighter. That's okay too. But if you feel like it needs to be a little more drastic of a change, then you can add to your piece, you can add or subtract 10 stitches from the foundation chain. So because each of these color changes, this is 5 and this is 5, so we have a total of 10, so that's your repeat. So you can, you know, add or subtract 10 stitches, and what that's going to do, it's not just going to add or subtract this amount, it's going to double it, because remember you have two sides to your teapot. This is only one side, so if you change it, say you removed, you know, 10 stitches, you're also going to be removing 10 stitches from the opposite side of your teapot. So it's just one of those things you're just going to have to try it on your teapot if you have a different size teapot, and just sort of adjust, and then just keep checking it. Once you get one side to the right width, then you know how to crochet the second side. All right, so then once you're ready to start doing the decreases, because we're going to make decreases to shape the top of our cozy, right, to come in here a little bit. Once you start getting ready for the decreases, let me show you how those are worked. So we have just finished working a wrong side row here, and then we would chain one. Oh yeah, I was doing this one for my tiny teapot, so I'm going to continue with this. So just ignore the fact that I'm using a G hook here. Chain one, turn your work. We're going to do a single crochet into each of the first 2 stitches. We're going to change to the next color, so I'm just going to lay this down, grab that next color, yarn over with the next color, pull on the strand a little bit here, and I'm going to work 3 single crochets in this color. 1, 2, 3, and now we've got 2 more stitches left, and we're going to do a single crochet 2 together, just a regular single crochet 2 together. So we're going to insert, yarn over, pull up a loop. Then we're going to insert, yarn over, pull up a loop in the next stitch. Now we have 3 loops on our hook, and we're going to yarn over and pull through all 3. Oh wait, but before we pull through all 3, we got to switch to the next color. I almost forgot. So we're going to lay this across our work, grab that, yarn over, pull through all 3. And now we're ready to go for the next section of color. So we'll crochet 3, 1, 2, and here, 3. These are just single crochets. Now we have 2 stitches left. So insert, yarn over, pull up a loop. Insert, yarn over, pull up a loop. There's 3 loops on our hook. And we're going to grab that lighter color and yarn over with that. We're still pinching and making those floats nice and short. Now we're going to do 3 single crochets. 1, 2, 3. Insert, yarn over, pull up a loop. Insert, yarn over, pull up a loop. We're going to drop that color, pinch our work, yarn over, and pull through 3 with that new color. And then we're going to do 3 single crochets. 1, 2, 3. And here's our single crochet 2 together while we're switching to the next color. Okay? So you may notice as you're working across that there are strands here. Of course, we know there are strands there, but if you are somebody who does a lot of tapestry crochet, you might be like, oh, should we just crochet over those strands? I don't know if I like those strands. If you do that, it's going to flatten out your piece. So do not try to incorporate those strands that are floating there into your stitches. I know sometimes we just have a tendency to want to kind of hide all that stuff. This just has to be on the inside of your tea cozy. It's not going to hurt anything, I promise. All right, so I've got 3 stitches, 3 single crochets here. And we're going to make a single crochet 2 together. And we're dropping that yarn, picking up the next color. We're going to bring that a little closer. Make that yarn over, or just make the yarn over kind of tightly, however you want to think about that. And you're ready to go with the next color. Just like that. It's not that hard. I mean, at first it's a little bit awkward and weird to be pinching your yarn, but it will just become part of the rhythm. And once you've gone, once you've done a few rows, those pleats are already going to be there. It's going to be real easy to just grab it, pinch it, pull it through. Honestly, it's very fun to do. All right, so we're doing our decreases all the way across. We're always going to be making that decrease on the last 2 stitches right before the color change. Okay, and you'll get all the way across, and you do 1 single crochet into each of the last 2 stitches, chain, and turn. Then there's 3 rows that you just work even. Work even means you're not increasing, you're not decreasing, you're just putting 1 stitch into each stitch. You're still doing the pleats, you're still changing colors as you normally would, but now because we did our decreases on this row, you're only going to be working four stitches in each color when you're alternating. So 4, 4, 4, 4, 4. You're just going to alternate, but you're just going to be, placing the same color into each color stitch. It's very easy to keep track of where you're at because there's, first of all, these pleats here, and you know how many stitches are supposed to be across in each section. So it's pretty simple. Looks like Helene is saying, I'm a collector of, or Helen is a collector of teapots, and my daughter-in-law, and granddaughter love to go to tea and have the parties. Awesome. My 12-year-old granddaughter crochets and will also enjoy making this. Oh, that is so awesome. I love that. Cool. Oh, we've got someone from, Janet from England. Yes, of course. I know you guys love your tea over there. I actually was able to go to England, and I had tea, and I was just like amazed by all the care that gets put into it, all the little sandwiches and the pastries and all the different teas, and it was very fun. Okay. Hannah's saying, instead of carrying the yarn across the back, we leave it where it is and bring it in from where it's at. Yes, exactly. So I think what you're saying is, like, instead of just, normally when we're doing a colorwork project, we would be stitching our way across like this. I'll get to my little decrease here. And then normally we would strand it across the back, and we would be very careful not to pull on this, all right? So it allows our piece to be nice and flat. But instead of just, stranding it over, you just bring the two pieces closer to each other. You leave it where it is, basically, and then you yarn over, and it forces it to just pop forward into that little pleat. So that is actually... that is very, very fun to do, you guys. I really hope you guys try this out. Okay, so you're going to work back and forth when you're shaping the top to kind of bring it in, doing those decreases. You're only decreasing on the right side rows, and at the beginning, the frequency, like you decrease on the row that I was showing you, where you decrease from 5 stitches in the color to 4. Then you're going to do 3 rows where you work even. Then on the next row, you're going to decrease from 4 to 3. So you're going to end up with 3 after you do that row. Then you're going to do another 3 rows even. This is all in your pattern, by the way. You don't have to memorize this. And then after that, you're going to decrease from 3 stitches in each color, or before switching colors, down to 2. And then you only do 1 row even, working across a wrong side row. And then on the next row, you're going to do single crochet so that you end up with only 1 stitch in each color across. Okay, so you're going to do another decrease row. I hope that makes sense. It's all written in the pattern. Just as long as you remember, you're only decreasing on the right side rows and just follow your pattern. If you're reading it through your pattern and you're like, it's too wordy, if you just want to cheat a little bit and you look at the end of the row, if there's something in parentheses that tells you the stitch count changed and it says how many stitches decreased, just know you did a decrease row. And anytime you do those decrease rows, you're decreasing once in every single section of color. Okay, it doesn't matter what size you're working on or whatever. You just stitch your way across until there's 2 stitches left in that color, and then single crochet them together. Move on to the next color, if that makes sense. So if you're like looking through here, wondering where all the decreases are, just kind of cheat and look at the end. If you don't want to read through everything, then you'll just know where you decrease, which rows you have to decrease on. So once you get that all shaped, let me see, I've got 1 more row to do on this piece. So this is what my piece is looking like. I just did a row of decreasing, so I have 1 stitch in each color across. Then I worked 1 more row across, 1 more wrong side row. And on the very last row, you're only working it in the, whichever color you want, honestly, because it's underneath the flowers. Nobody's ever going to see this. I just left it in the main color. So I chain 1 and turn, and I'm going to do single crochets, 1 single crochet into each of the first 2 stitches. Wait, let me just double check. Single crochet, yeah. So we're leaving, this is basically a selvage where these 2 stitches are on each end. So there's 1 there and there's 1 here. Think of that as being like a seam allowance. for when we're sewing this together. So you're going to leave your seam allowance alone, putting 1 single crochet into each stitch. You're not decreasing your seam allowance at all. We're just keeping it the same. Then when you get to this part where you're switching back and forth, the very last row, you're going to just single crochet them 2 together all the way across the colorwork section. So that's what I'm doing here. So insert yarn over, pull up a loop, insert yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 3. Okay, we're just doing that all the way across until we have 2 stitches left. And here's those 2 stitches, and then you can just make 1 stitch into each of the last 2 stitches, just like that, and that's it. So we're gonna fasten off and leave yourself a good long yarn tail, and we're just gonna pull that through, fasten that off. And you will make a second one of these, so you're gonna have two halves, basically. And actually, you know, the whole time you're working on this, maybe have your teapot nearby so that you can just be checking and making sure that your decreases are shaping to your teapot. You know, you may find that you have to rip back a little and do a couple more rows in between. If you have like a more gradual top to your teapot, I've seen some of those really taller ones, then you're gonna have more rows in between where you're not doing any decreasing, okay, if that makes sense. Like your decrease rows should be less frequent and you can make it a little bit taller. And after you have gone all the way through, you can go ahead and cinch up this top, or you can try it on your teapot and see what you, like, you may find that you don't want to cinch it up. If you needed to like keep going and finish up the little top, you could just keep turning and decreasing a little bit more, or working some rows even, just depending on what the top shape of your teapot is. But for, I think, most teapots, it'll work just fine to just cinch up the top. Let's see, I'm gonna get to the finishing section here. Oh, yeah. Okay. So you can leave this open until later, or you can go ahead and run that yarn tail through each stitch and pull it tight to kind of tighten up the top, which is what I'm going to do for this little teapot. I think it would probably work for most teapots. Bring it across to this side here. So I ran that yarn using my yarn needle through, and now I can kind of pull this together and just kind of check the fit. I think that's going to be just fine. It's nice and stretchy. Okay, so at this point, you're going to take your 2 halves and I'm going to cinch up the top of this half as well, since I didn't do that yet. Here's my second half. All right, almost there. All right, so we're just gonna cinch that in, and we'll end up stitching that a little bit more later. Here, I'm gonna do one little stitch so it doesn't undo. Okay, so because we made these exactly the same, see, they're not mirror images of each other, they're just made with the exact same directions. When you place them together, the color striping is going to continue. So like, here's our 2 little selvages. We're going to sew those together, but you can see it goes from purple to gray, right? Because we made these exactly the same way. So I'm going to set that on top of my teapot, and this is the part that's probably the most awkward of this whole project, because you just kind of have to just check the fit, pin them together, or use stitch markers like I'm doing here. Oops, where did that go? There we go. I'm pinning them together where what I like to think of as the seam allowances, those 2 like columns of 2 single crochets where they meet up. We're going to be pinning those together. And what we have to do is we have to figure out how far we want to sew this and still have room for the handle and the spout to come out. So you really have to just sort of fit it on your own teapot to know. Here we go. It looks like maybe here, I'll sew these two together here. Like this. And down here, there's really not going to be a very long seam, probably only like an inch or so on the very bottom. So I'm going to it's too awkward for me to do that. So I know there's going to be about an inch stitched together down here. So I'm going to pin that, well, by using my stitch markers. I'm just holding those two seam allowances held together here. Alrighty. All right, and then I think this other side, I'm gonna get this spout through there. There we go. This other side. Oh, there's not much room on my teapot. There's like less than an inch even really here. It's probably only going to be able to be stitched just a little bit at the very bottom. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and sew these together. I'm going to flip this so that it is wrong side out, so I can see what I'm doing a little bit better here, and hopefully you guys can too. I got to take care of this insane amount of yarn ends I have hanging out. I'm always so reluctant to cut off my yarn tails because I think, what if I need that? Okay. Okay, so I hope this is clear enough what I'm saying here, that these two, like you've got those columns of 2 single crochets at the beginning and at the end of all of, both of your pieces. So we are going to go ahead and stitch those together right where they change color. So see how the gray changes to purple here? Right along this line. We're going to sew that line to this line right here. And so you can do that, and you can do that by just laying them together like this. And you can just sew them together with one of the yarn tails here you have available to you. But you have to make sure that the pleats are not getting, so for example, this pleat, it might end up getting stuck this way and you might catch it. So you just have to make sure the pleat is out of the way. You can just be feeling that with your fingers. You can feel that kind of lump if it fits in the way. So I'm going to do a back stitch. You can do, go back and forth in just a running stitch if you want to, as long as it's sturdy. It doesn't really matter. And I'm only sewing down to this point where I had pinned it with my stitch marker. So to do a back stitch, because I'm right-handed, I'm always going to have my needle facing to the left, and I'm going to go in. This is where my yarn is coming out. I'm going to go in behind and take a whole stitch forward like this, and then I take a half a stitch back. Or you might think of it as 2 steps forward, 1 and 2, and then 1 step back. So every time you put your needle in, you're putting it behind where it came out. Okay, I've got a couple more stitches left here. All right. And I noticed I really liked having this seam allowance sort of pushed out of the way. So I actually ended up catching that seam allowance right there with this little kind of section where, see how there's the purple strands and they come towards the gray strands, right in the middle where it switches. That's where I'm stitching the edge of that seam allowance to, because I just liked it to remain open. But this is the kind of thing where you probably just want to try it on your teapot, see how it's working. Maybe you don't need to stitch this part down, or maybe you don't want to either, I don't know. But I just sort of liked how it looked when it was folded out of the way a little bit. So you don't actually see that little other color seam allowance sticking out. So I'm gonna do that, just catching that area where we change colors. And now here we are back at another little seam we need to make. This is the seam that is just below where the bottom of the handle comes out. I'm just gonna remove that and get that out of the way. So I'm gonna be sewing these two layers together using the same back stitch, and I'm gonna go around that bottom edge there. Okay, so we would do the same thing where we're stitching that seam allowance down out of the way if you want to. You don't have to, that part is optional. And I'm going to sew the other side, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about those flowers. I'll show you how to make one. We're not just going to talk about it. I'm going to show you how to make one. Okay, so here we are on the other seam. I'm going to be sewing to here, and then I'm going to be sewing down here as well. Sewing over the edge a little bit there, just to make sure that stays nice and flat. And then I'm going to just be doing a back stitch here. And you know, if you have a different method you prefer to sew, that's completely fine. You don't have to do it the way that I'm doing it. I just wanted you to have, you know, all the tools and understand like how I put mine together. And you know, you're the boss of your own projects. You can do what you like. All right, I have just a little bit further to go, but I'm going to take this stitch marker out of here because it's getting in the way. So this is the side with the spout. So that's another thing, is if you know, you don't think you're going to remember which side is which, you could put a little tag or a little something to indicate what the front is or where the spout is, if that's helpful to you. All right, and I am going to fold the seam allowance to the inside and stitch it down right here, and that allows me to kind of keep using the same strand of yarn for when I stitch the other part, like this little section down here. And you just want to be careful when you're stitching this down that you're not making like a big, you don't want to make a big stitch through here so you see it. So I have my finger held behind it, and I can feel if my yarn, if my needle comes through the fabric. I'm just trying to grab like a little strand or so, kind of going within the fabric, but not popping out the other side, if that makes sense, for when I'm stitching these down. And like I said, you don't have to stitch these down. You can just see how it looks. I just thought it looked a little tidier if they were out of the way. All right. I'm going to pull these out and stitch this little last seam here. Oh, Dolores is saying hello from Belize. Hello, Dolores. Welcome. I love that we can all craft from all over the world. That's just so amazing to me still. I know I shouldn't be surprised since I do these tutorials, you know, like 2 or 3 times a month. I should probably stop being surprised by that. But every time somebody tells me where they're stitching from, I'm always like so excited about it, you guys. So cool. Okay. All right, so I don't know if I wove that in very well. Just gonna give it one more little push. Okay, and so then I would also be stitching the other side of this opening down. I would just kind of tack that down because I think it looks better to do that. Up to you though, however you like. I'm gonna cut that off because I won't need that. I'm just kind of trying to get rid of some of these the extra craziness. I still want to be able to weave them in later, but there's just too much. Okay, you guys. So now, after you get your pieces stitched together like that, then we can like really close the top of this up. I think laying it on top of your teapot, though, is a good idea before you do that. The cool thing about this is you've got, like, it's almost like having a dress form if you're making a little stripy dress. Look how cute this is looking. It's adorable. Okay, so now I am going to close the very top here. And then we can start making a flower. All right. Let's see. So even if you cinch that as tight as it will go, it still isn't going to be able to completely close probably because there's a lot of fabric in there. So then you can just kind of sew it shut, like in a couple of directions. Like this. There we go. And this does not have to look perfect right here because, well, first of all, we're not robots. But second of all, this is going to get covered up by those flowers. And I suspect that part of the reason why so many of these tea cozies have like pom-poms and things on top is just to make that part look a little bit more finished and decorated and cover up any funniness that might happen with gathering stuff together or however it's been constructed. So yeah, don't you worry. We're going to cover that up with pretty flowers, or you could put a pom-pom on it if you're into pom-poms. All right. So I'm going to get rid of that. So this is what it's looking like so far. We have that little slit there. We have a little slit here. Whoops, that's not very, I gotta tuck that. See, this is why I like to sew the seam allowance down. So I'm gonna tuck that to the inside there. So I will be doing that later. Because my handle is kind of long here, I mean, I thought about putting a little button with a button loop here to keep it a little tighter. And then I decided against it because I'm like, am I really going to do that? Probably not. I'll just pop it over and have some tea. I really don't think I'm going to fiddle with the button. But if that's something, depending on how your teapot is shaped, you may want to do that. You may want to have like a little extra button loop or something like that if there's a really long space on your handle. Okay, so let's get to the flower. I will demonstrate with this lighter pink here, but you can choose whatever colors you like. So we're going to start with a chain of 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And then we're going to do, in this second chain from the hook, so there's the first chain, here's the second chain, we're going to do a half double crochet. Then we're going to chain 2, 1 and 2. Then we're going to do another half double crochet in the same chain, just like that. Now we're going to do that in every chain across. So here's a half double crochet, chain 2, and another half double crochet into the next chain. Half double crochet, chain 2, and another half double crochet into the next chain. Okay, so each chain gets half double crochet, chain 2, half double crochet. And it's going to start to curl because we're making a lot of increases here. Half double crochet, chain 2, half double crochet. Half double crochet, chain 2, half double crochet. If you guys are excited about this sort of embellished crochet with flowers and things like that, I did a class on Craftsy that is out now called Embellished Crochet, and we make a lot of these kind of extra applique flowers to go on things, and I teach you how to decorate stuff with needle felting and embroidery with yarn. It's just kind of a fun way to decorate your crocheted or knitted things that you make. If you guys are interested in checking that out, it's pretty cool. All right, so we finished up with our last chain. Now we're going to chain 1, turn our work, and then you can pretty easily see those chain 2 spaces. If you can't see them, you can certainly feel them. You can put your little finger in there and note where they are. We're going to be working into all those chain 2 spaces. So in each chain 2 space, you're going to do a slip stitch, chain 1, 2 double crochets, 1, 2, chain 2, slip stitch in the second chain from the hook, 2 more double crochets, 1, 2, chain 1, and then slip stitch in the very same chain 2. So that was all in the first chain 2 space. All right, I'm going to do that again. Slip stitch, chain 1, 2 double crochets, 1 and 2, chain 2, 1, 2, slip stitch in the second chain from the hook, 2 more double crochets, 1 and 2, chain 1, slip stitch, and that completes that chain 2. So we're going to continue doing that all the way across. Slip stitch, chain 1, 2 double crochets. Sorry, I'm going to go a little quicker now because we're running out of time. Chain 2, slip stitch in the second chain from the hook, 2 double crochets, chain 1, slip stitch. All right, so that made it the third petal. Slip stitch, chain 1, 2 double crochets, chain 2. I know this seems like a lot to memorize, but you'll by the time you do the third flower, you'll be like, oh, I know how to make these. No problem. Locked away in that brain forever. And this probably goes without saying, but you can certainly make a different amount of flowers. You just decorate it however you like. On the top, I just made 3, but you could certainly do more or fewer. Like one really big one if you wanted to. If you wanted to make one with a whole bunch of petals, you just start out with a bigger foundation chain. Oops, there's my 2 double crochets, chain 2, slip stitch, 2 double crochets, chain 1, slip stitch in the same chain 2 space, and we'll do it again. I think we have 2 more after this one. So if you guys are hanging on to any other questions, definitely get them in. So we're going to be wrapping this up pretty soon here. All right, one more petal. And then I'll show you how to make this look like a flower, because right now it looks like a blob. Chain 1, slip stitch, and we're going to slip stitch to fasten off and leave yourself a decent sized yarn tail, because you're going to use that to sew your flower together and onto the teapot. All right, so when you're done with that, turn your work so the petals kind of curve this way. This is what I think of as being the right side for this project. And you see these 3 first petals. Here we have our yarn tail, or those are the last 3 we made. we're going to make those into a circle. Basically, we're connecting this petal to the third petal like that. So we've got basically a triangle of those three. Okay, so if you pinch it at that point, then you should be able to wrap the rest of them around and have the very end and right there. So there's at least two petals, or two layers, I should say, all the way around your flower. It's probably a good idea to thread the yarn needle before you start doing that. Otherwise you'll probably drop it. And then you're just going to, oops, where did that come from? There we go. You're just going to use your yarn tails to stitch through the layers there. So you want to make sure you're getting all the layers. I'm just sewing right through the center of this flower here. All right, so I would do that a little more to make sure it's all tacked down. Then you're going to make a flower center, and those are super easy. It's just basically like one random bobble. So we're going to chain 3. So 1, 2, and 3. And then we're going to make 6 double crochets into the third chain from the hook, but we're going to hold back on that last yarn over for every one of them. So what that looks like is this. So we'll yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 and stop. Now we're going to do that 5 more times. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now we have 7 loops on our hook, and we're going to yarn over and pull through everything all at once. And then we're just going to chain 1, and then we can go ahead and cut our yarn and pull that through. And so we've made just this cute little ball that, you know, you can kind of poke in there with your finger to kind of round it out a little bit more. But we made this very adorable little ball that's going to be the center of our flower. So you can go ahead and sew that on, and then you can sew the entire flower to the top of your tea cozy. So you'll probably need to pin those in place or just set them all on there. It's pretty sticky, they might stay. And then I ended up just stitching through the middle of the flower, then adding, you can either sew this to the flower first and then sew the bottom of the flower on, or you can sew this part of the flower on through the middle and then sew this on top. It does not matter what order you do that in, but you'll have 3 of them. But I would definitely place all 3 to get a feel for where you want them to be before you sew any of them on. Okay, so you'll get all 3 of your flowers made. And then the last thing I want to show you is the leaves. So I'm going to be doing these in a lighter green, so hopefully you can see them a little better. The leaves, we're just going to start out with by chaining 9. And I do, by the way, I do have a stitch diagram for the flower. I don't have one for the leaves because they're so simple. So we're going to chain 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then we're going to start by placing a slip stitch in the second chain from the hook. So that's right here. And then a single crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. 1, 2. Half double crochets into each of the next 2. So yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through 3. That's a half double crochet. We'll do that again right here. And then we'll do a double crochet in the next stitch. And then we're going to do, let's see, I think it's 2 double crochets. Yes. So we're going to do 2 double crochets into each of the next 2 chains. So here's our first double crochet, our second double crochet, and now we get to the very last chain, and we're going to do 2 more double crochets. So yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and we'll do that one more time. And now we're just going to let our piece keep rotating, and we're going to make basically a mirror image of what we just made. So that same chain we've already just been working in, we're going to do 2 more double crochets. So 1, 2, and then 2 more double crochets in the next chain. So this is the original foundation chain. We're just working into the opposite side of it, the opposite loops. Then the next stitch is a double crochet, and then 2 half double crochets, 1 in each of the next 2 stitches, and 2 single crochets, 1 and 2, each into their own stitch. Sorry, should have said that. And then the last stitch is just a slip stitch here. And then we can cut our yarn. Leave yourself a good long yarn tail because you're going to use that to sew it to your piece. So you'll get all of your flowers pinned onto the top of your little tea cozy. And then in between where your flowers are sitting, you're going to tuck those little leaves in there and sew those in place. So I did actually sew my flowers first, and then I just kind of moved them out of the, like peeled their petals up a little bit so I could access that and get those little leaves in between your flowers and add those on top, and it makes a lovely arrangement. Okay, looks like I'm all caught up with questions, and that is it. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I really appreciate you guys being here and giving me some tea suggestions, and I'll be looking into that stuff. Yeah, and I always appreciate you guys, being active in the chat and saying hi and all that stuff. That means a lot to me. So thank you, everybody. I hope you guys have a great day, and I hope you make some really cute tea cozies. Bye, everyone.